Okay guys, so in this video we're going to be talking about long form theory. I know what you're like, hey, more theory from Alex, that's fantastic, let's do it. You got to know this as well. I wish we could just skip to some magic script that I could give you and it would work, and it doesn't work like that. So we need to understand all the things that are going on in a webinar and what's at play. Because a lot of people, again, like we talked about in the last video, they view webinars as like, it's like a bunch of blocks you put together and then you got a house. It's not how it is. It's very gray. And unless you understand the effects that are going on underneath it, you're going to always make decisions that are going to take us off the path we need to be on when we're writing a webinar. You're going to make silly decisions. It's for example, if you ever seen guys who get into like pickup or dating and they try and use scripts on women, they try and like follow a repeatable, predictable pattern conversation on women they're talking to. It never works, because what happens is, because they don't understand the underlying principles of communicating with another human, what then happens is even though the script is word for word right, they split off the path of acceptable communication because they don't understand the path in the first place. And so they end up making some type of mistake that makes it stick out, and then the girl doesn't end up liking them. It's the same exact thing when it comes to selling. Okay, if you don't understand the fundamentals of what's going on underneath and your strengths and why we're doing certain things, you're going to do them the wrong way. Okay, you're gonna do things like try and get the webinar button out sooner, when the person hasn't been perfectly persuaded. Okay, the same thing as asking a person for their phone number 5 minutes in the conversation, or there's so many other things. Like, it depends on, like, for example, if depending on the person, like, not even talking to women, just depending on the person you're talking to, if you start whipping out certain, like, if you start talking about certain subjects, if you don't look at the area the person lives in or whatever like that, you're probably going to piss them off. If you don't look at the person's views on life, talking about your Lamborghini when you first meet them might super turn them off. Okay? And so there's like so many things, if you apply from one person to another without understanding the person and what's going on, you're just going to really throw the person off. So we need to think about, first off, why do we do long form webinars? What's the point? Do we just have 2-hour long webinars just for shits and giggles? Like, why do we need to spend so much time? Why can't we just have a 10-minute sales video and sell people a $2,000 product? Well, it becomes pretty clear when you take in a lot of principles of human nature. So I would definitely read the book. I'd definitely read the book Influence. I'd read the book Win Bigly. And those two will really get you down, will get you in right here. There's also a really good book on negotiation, but I'll lay into that here more in a second. So the reason why we do long form webinars is explained kind of using these examples I'll show you right here. So on a college study, they went to a college and they showed people 100 faces, let's say 300 times. And none of these stories are exactly word for word going to match up with the actual studies, because I don't have the exact numbers and faces shown. I'm just going to tell you the lessons from the studies so you understand. So they went to a college campus and they showed people 100 faces 300 times, but they weren't all equally distributed. Some faces got shown 30 times, some faces got shown 1 time. Then what they did after the exercise of showing them the faces, they had people look at the faces and put the top 5 most trustworthy faces at the top of the list. The faces that were showed 30, 50 times always were at the top of the list. Why? Because familiarity equals trust. The amount of time you spend with somebody, the amount of time you see someone equals trust. Now, getting people to micro commit to things over time, multiplied over time, plus trust, equals some really insane things. So, for example, in Chinese concentration camps, the way they would convert Americans to communism wasn't through forcing them or hitting them with belts or making them do things. We have to make people believe things are their idea. And in order to do that, it takes time. And it takes familiarity. And it takes seeing the same thing over and over again and repeating it. And so what the Chinese would do is they would offer the Americans little prizes for maybe writing an article on why they'd have article writing contests where people would all write an article, and obviously the articles that had a little bit of kind words to say about communism would win, but the reward was only like one cigarette. It wasn't something that a person could completely separate from themselves. So for example, if I gave you $10,000 to say you enjoy eating poo, you would completely understand that you don't enjoy eating poo, and you just said it for $10,000. I know it's a gross example, but let's move forward. But if I only gave you 5 cents to say that, you'd really kind of question why you're saying such things. Like, I mean, the 5 cents wasn't really an incentive. Do I actually enjoy eating poo? Again, gross, but this is exactly how they persuaded Americans who were hardcore capitalists and Democrats, or democratic into democracy, into saying, oh, communism isn't actually that bad, and then actually believing communism was the best way. Because what they do over time is they would have people come in the rooms, they'd have them, they'd write out an article or a piece of paper saying communism is the best form of government, and then they have a person just sign their name there, and then they give them one cigarette or something like that. And they would do little micro things like that over and over and over again. And the brain and a person, when it cannot attach its actions to an obvious objective, has to attach it to something. And when you make people make these little micro commitments and micro surrenders, you slowly whittle down the person's identity and turn it into something else. And so what you're going to see us doing on webinars is constantly getting the person to micro commit to certain things. And it's really hard to get people to make one big commitment in a 5-minute video. It's very easy to get people to make hundreds of micro commitments to the point that their brain, at the end of the webinar, the only thing that makes makes sense to a self-respecting person is to buy, because they've just made all these micro commitments. It's like they just signed 200 papers saying communism is good. They've written articles saying communism is good. They've gone in the groups and they've talked about the benefits of communism. And again, this was never on their on their will. They did it for little prizes or getting, a bag of rice or something like that. But over time, people are going to start aligning with what they say and do. They have to. It's just how the brain works. Okay, this is why you see when people move to different areas. For example, like I'm moving to Austin right now, and there's a lot of liberals there, and I don't really have political beliefs. But the more liberals I hang out around, the more I can see the benefits to liberalism versus conservatism versus Dallas, where it's the same exact thing, and all my friends are super conservative. Now, I don't believe in politics whatsoever. I think it's the dumbest thing ever. But you see how just the environment you're in changes you. It changes how your mind works against your will. Okay? Now, next thing you need to understand is how the American government, for example, would convert spies into allies or double agents was the same exact thing. Whenever the Americans would find out during the USSR when it was running, when they know a spy was in their midst, the last thing they would do is throw him in a cell and start interrogating him, because it would never work. They actually had 2 methods, so I'll explain 2 of them, and you'll understand why we want to use webinars. So the first method they would do is they would just have a spy start following the other spy around very subtly. So when the person's at maybe Starbucks or at the grocery store, the person would be there buying coffee and shopping too. Maybe go down the same aisle as them, walk off. They do that literally for a month. Then the next month, the person would walk up and just kind of say, and recognize the fact that they've seen each other a few times and go, oh, hey, how are you doing? That's it. Or I see you here a lot. Have a nice day. That's it. And then over time, the person would gradually start showing up more and more and more in places the person was at. And what would happen is, because time plus familiarity equals trust, what would happen, the spy would naturally start to trust this person and open up. And so by the time that a person would actually approach the spy and say, hey, and actually strike up a conversation, the spy already knew them, was familiar with them, and already built some warmness to them. This is exactly how they converted so many Russian agents into double agents. Because if there's any fraction of the person that really wasn't in agreement with what they were doing, which there always is with people, there's always, no one's ever 100% on anything they're doing. That's how you bring it out of them. Because once that wall is down, that wall of trust has been broken, or I mean the the wall of distrust has been broken, a person becomes open to a lot of things. They're talking about a lot of things. When a person's open to talking and hearing certain things, that's when they can be molded. And this is how they converted so many spies. They'd walk up to spies, and the spy knew the entire time that they were being followed, but over time they just grew to trust the person. Another way they would convert spies is they would go into an interrogation room, and a person would just sit down and start reading a newspaper for months. Just wouldn't say anything. And the spy would go insane and want to start talking about something. So they'd start talking about family and friends and whatever. And then over time, they'd slowly start talking about the thing the Americans wanted to talk about, which was, what are you doing? What are your objectives? Become a double agent. It worked a surprising amount. These are people whose entire identity is with their country, and they're literally over in another country spying to cause damage to that country, and they end up doing the complete reverse. How does this happen? It's time and familiarity. Now, regardless of your views on Trump, again, I'm going to mention politics a lot when we get into copyright, because it is such a beautiful example of how moldable people's brains are beyond logic. I don't hold political views. I don't care. My views on politics is I'll move and live where it benefits me most. That's it. I don't try and lose my mind over the emotional feelings of an entire nation, or try and think to myself that complaining about how they're behaving has any effect on how they behave. So that's my views on politics. I'm going to mention Trump a lot, because there's so many good copywriting examples. So I'm encouraging you, as we watch this, to drop your opinions, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, and look more at the result, which is Trump won the election. How did it happen? Okay, and then also you can look exactly at how liberals behave and how conservatives behave, and say, how do people get like this? Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how Trump won the election by playing off of one of the absolute keys we're about to talk about. And that is, people don't think things are important because they're important. They think things are important because they are talked about a lot. So if you look at how Trump ran his campaign and hooked the Democrats and the media hook, line, and sinker, how did he do it? What was the big thing that his campaign was all about? Immigration. Why did he focus on immigration? You probably think because immigration is important. No, it's not. No election. I've watched elections, Obama and the guy he ran against before. I watched George Bush run. No one ever talked about immigration. No one even mentioned it. In fact, I remember when Obama and Romney were debating, it was like a side topic at the back of the discussion, and nobody even watched this debate. No one gave a shit about immigration. Why? Because no one ever talked about it. Didn't matter. So, how did Trump get into the forefront? How did a guy that was a 1% outlier become the president of the United States? Well, here's exactly how it started off, and here's exactly how it progressed. Trump goes on stage, yells inflammatory remarks in a time of extreme social correctness, gets in a news cycle. Okay, he said something about Mexicans being drug dealers, and it depends how you want to interpret what he said, okay? Because it can go either way depending on where you're viewing things from. It can go either way. If you're a person who's extremely sensitive to this type of information, it's going to go hard one way. If you're a person that's not, it's going to go hard. You're going to say, oh, he's making logical statements. If you're an emotional person, you're going to end up over here. Okay? Or if you side on the liberal side of views of the world, it's going to go very far. So he said something that was just right on the borderline. So what happens? Media goes absolutely nuts. Just goes insane. Liberals went insane. Everybody went insane over these remarks. What happened? Well, these inflammatory remarks were broadcasted all over TV 24/7. And he didn't stop. He just kept saying things that just sit right in the middle. Just sit right in the middle. Now, what would happen? Okay, so immigration got brought to the forefront because all anybody was talking about was Trump's immigration policies and his remarks on immigration. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about this. People start thinking immigration is important, and that's amazing for Trump. Why? Because his argument on immigration is very strong. Now, let me explain. From a policy standard, we can talk about how strong it is either way. I don't care. Where it is strong is because people only give a fuck about themselves. And so when people are thinking about what's in it for me, immigration is a losing debate. If you talk about, hey, should we give money to someone else or should we give money to you, that debate is always going to swing towards the individual, because people don't give a shit about other people. That is the only thing you can really trust in human nature. People consistently are going to look out for themselves and make decisions that are best for themselves. Immigration is an extremely strong issue for Trump in this election because people are naturally going to want to take care of themselves and not an immigrant. I'm not talking policy, I'm just talking human ass nature. So what happens? Immigration becomes the most important thing being talked about, and Trump is very strong in immigration. Now the media is putting out all of his talking points that he's very strong on and ignoring all of the talking points of Hillary Clinton. All of the things she's strong on, and liberals are very strong on a few things. Okay, they're very strong in a few things that are just completely morally objectionable. They're going to win on rights. They're going to win on those things. But they didn't get to play those cards. They didn't get to play those cards like they wanted to, because the entire debate got focused to what Trump was making inflammatory remarks about. And so what can we learn from all this? What is talked about and repeated becomes important. It doesn't change the person's view on it. It doesn't change the person's view on it. It just suddenly becomes important. Now, the most beautiful thing about this is when we get a person into a webinar and we're constantly repeating something over and over and over again, which in this example, you're going to see a few things repeated in the HCOM webinar. HCOM gets results, and that the safe life is insanely dangerous, and that starting an online business is safe and easy and quick. And our arguments on those are extremely strong, and that's what people want to believe when they come in. They want some excuse to make money. And so by repeating these things over and over and over again in inflammatory emotional ways, it becomes important, and then we can win the argument on them. When something is important, then people start really wanting to solve the problem. They start really wanting to focus in on this thing. Why? Because it's been repeated over and over and over again, that it just becomes a default, that this is important. Webinars let us control exactly what is important over time. This is how Trump won the election. This is how we'll get people to buy things. Now, reciprocation is another thing what we're going to be doing. We're constantly going to be giving stuff away in our webinar. Constantly, constantly, constantly. When you give things away to people, they are much more likely to do what you want. So, for example, when there's this charity out there and they walk up and give people flowers before they ask for something. Why? Because when you give someone something, they're significantly more percentage-wise likely to give. And so the people that give flowers, they know people that are they're onto their roots. They're even like banned from certain areas because they know how powerful the law of reciprocation is. And even if people don't want the flower, they still give it to them, and it still increases the chance that people say yes. This is why whenever you want to sell something to someone, you want to give them as much stuff that doesn't cost you anything as possible before you ask for something. We do this a ton in webinars. Now, another thing people need to do is they need to align with one's view of themselves. All right, they need to align their actions and the view of themselves with their actions. So what we're going to do in these webinars and long-form sales copy is we make people view themselves in a different way. For example, in HCOM, I make people view themselves and identify with their future selves, their smart, successful selves. You have to understand, people have a desperate need to identify. This is why whenever you're doing anything, when you look at your shoes, you say, what type of shoes does Alex Becker wear? What type of profile picture does Alex Becker have? What type of things do I say? What type of beliefs do I have? People cannot accept being in gray areas of their lives. They must be somewhere, and they must be able to pinpoint exactly what they are, because the human brain goes insane when it doesn't have a pattern. This is why people buy Louis Vuittons. This is why people buy Lamborghinis. This is why people have extreme pain about losing their wealth, because they identify as a wealthy person. So they're going to take the actions of a wealthy person. When they go to a club, they're going to buy the most expensive thing. They're going to buy the most expensive watch. They're going to buy all these things because they identify for it. Okay, so if we can get a person to spend $40,000 on a thing that tells them time because they identify with it, we can probably get a person who identifies with the views that we're putting in the webinar to give us $2,000, $5,000. Extremely powerful. It's one of the most powerful things you can ever do when it comes to selling. So what we're constantly going to do in the event is get people to identify with the person we need them to be. And the only way to really do this is over time, repeating it over and over and over again, all right, and converting them. Now, finally, what you need to understand, especially when we're selling to people, is that pain versus gain, pain is always going to come first. And so it's way more important when we sell to sell a way out of pain first and then offer a gain. We want to play from both ends of the spectrum at the same time, but we always want to induce pain first. Pain is the most powerful selling thing you will ever be able to work with. If you come in and I say, I'm going to sell you a shoe that will protect your feet from nails, or you come in and I say, you have a nail in your foot, I'm going to remove it, you would pay more to get the nail removed than the pair of shoes. That's just it. So we want to put nails in people's feet. We want to cause massive pain because that's how we get them to buy out of it. And then finally, making the problem the biggest problem. Okay? This is the same thing with what I talked about with Trump. We need to make the problem that we need them to feel pain around the biggest problem in their life. We need to make immigration the biggest problem. We need to make whatever problem we are very strong in and have a very strong argument on the biggest problem. And that's exactly what we do in long-form webinars. Now, the next thing we need to understand in human nature is respect, trust, and rapport. When we're doing a webinar, the number one thing we have to always start attacking is respect, trust, and rapport. Because think about someone you've bought something from instantly. The equation for this is respect, trust, and rapport. So, for example, if I've had people join Iron because a friend told them, hey, join Iron. They message me, say, hey, can I get a little bit of information? I say barely anything. They give me $5,000. Why? Because respect, trust, and rapport has been achieved from the person that recommended Iron. So when we are doing a webinar, the number one thing we want to achieve is respect, trust, and rapport. If we achieve that, we can sell anybody anything. If we get them to actually listen to us, respect us, trust us, and have rapport with us, aka like us, they'll buy anything from us. It'll be very easy. If they have the money, they'll buy it. Especially if we get these key things in place. And the thing is, you must understand, people are willing to be misled. People are willing to believe anything from someone they respect, trust, and rapport with. Think about Obama or Trump. Both of them are liars. Both of them are liars. This isn't me being a political anarchist. Look at stuff Obama said. Look at stuff Trump said. It's all misrepresentations most of the time. It always is. That's just politics. But people believe it and fight over it to the death. Why? Respect, trust, and rapport. And identifying as an Obama supporter or a Trump supporter. It's hilarious. So you need to think about that. It's the willingness to be persuaded. If Trump puts something out there, unless it's an incredibly falsified fact, people are just going to be persuaded by it. And you say, oh, okay, cool, it's the best economy ever. When there's a lot of stats that say otherwise. Okay? When Obama puts something out there and saying, hey, this is the best direction for the nation to go. A lot of times there's stats that say otherwise, but they're going to pay attention to the stats that Trump and Obama give based on their willingness to be persuaded, their respect, trust, and rapport. And this is the number one thing long-form accomplishes because it puts us in a position of Obama or Trump. And again, not to go back to politics, but again, I'm just pointing out how people have insane willingness to be persuaded by their political party, even when it makes absolutely no sense. People go to war over these things. So we have to pay attention to it. So how do we build trust? A few things we're going to see us do in these webinars is I'm going to purposely throw myself under the bus. I'm going to reveal embarrassing truths about myself. So for example, you see when I start off, a perfect example of throwing yourself under the bus is if you've ever seen Frank Kern copy, he always will start off by showing off like a car or something, and then he'll throw himself on a bus. He'll like pull out a Rolls Royce and say, oh, and that's not mine. I don't even know if I could afford something like that. That's just for my dear wife because she's the most beautiful thing that's ever walked on this earth. So he shows how rich and successful he is while throwing himself under the bus. You're going to see me do the same thing in my webinars. It shows how powerful I am and that you should respect me, but it also builds rapport. Okay, so that's how we build trust. Now, another thing you can do to build trust is go try this. It's insane. Walk up to a person and tell them an embarrassing truth about yourself that's not real. So, for example, when I was in 5th grade, I shifted in my chair one time and released a toot, and then everyone in class laughed at me. It was so embarrassing. Go up and tell someone some story like that. What will happen? That never happened, by the way, but the person suddenly has the the law of reciprocation comes in, and a person will then fire back and tell you an embarrassing truth about themselves. You want to know embarrassing things about people? Go tell people false facts about yourself that are embarrassing. People will tell you everything. They'll tell you, they'll volunteer like 5 or 6 different things. Okay? You want to go and find out who's having tax problems? Go and make up stories about yourself having tax problems. You know exactly who's going bankrupt. Okay? What does this mean? That builds trust. Throwing yourself under the bus and revealing things you shouldn't be revealing builds that trust. Go out of your way to be honest. Especially, I expect everybody watching this to be honest by default. But what you need to do, and I'm going to point this out because there's a lot of ways to really misuse this information I'm giving you. Okay, so I expect everyone to be honest here. And if not, you'll pay for it later on. Don't worry about it. But go out of your way to be excessively honest when you first meet a person or when you start an event. So I log into my Stripe account. I log into all my numbers. And I make sure to justify like the first 5 or 6 things I say. Because when you're building trust, what people are going to do is they're going to look for a pattern. And usually there's patterns in 3s and 5s. And so if you go and make yourself super vulnerable 5 times by being excessively honest, everything after that, people are going to let go. So for example, if you ever watch Trump speak, he's going to put out 3 or 5 facts that are very plain Jane, honest facts, and then he's going to really start unleashing the not so straight up facts. But because people are like, oh, the first 4 or 5 things he said are true, we spot check those, they're just going to let the gate down. Anything comes in after that, whether it's complete bullshit or not, is believed. It's very powerful. But the main thing is when we are doing this, we're going to make a lot of claims in our events. And we really can't sell if people are constantly trying to call shit on us on our events. So we have to go out of our way and let that gate down very quickly. Okay, and another way to build trust is to spend time with people. The more time that is spent, the more trust and rapport is built. Okay, so how do you build rapport? Create like interest. A lot of people that watch my events are into Star Wars. They're men. So I talk about Star Wars. Or I talk about Pokemon. Or I talk about similar interests. Oh, we're the same person. You must create a bond through similar experiences. That's why that one also, the revealing secret that I talked about before, that's why this is very powerful. If you can go up to someone and create like interest, find out the things they're interested in or likely interested in, and then you create a bond through similar experiences, you have a massive edge over that person. And if you can make people feel emotions based around all these things right here, this is basically what a relationship is. This is why people that have been best friends since kindergarten and have nothing in common stay best friends. Similar interest, bond through similar experiences, and emotions. This is what attachment to other humans is. Okay, and it's more so these 2 things right here. Now, turbulence of emotion equals emotional connection. If you look at most relationships, people don't go with people that give them emotional stability. They go with people that give them emotional turbulence. Now, do I mean emotional abuse? Sometimes. But what I more so mean is people are attracted to people that make them feel a range of emotions. Okay? So if you ever notice like who girls are usually attracted to, it's usually men that make them uncomfortable. I don't mean in a creepy way. I mean men that are intimidating and make them feel, and because when a person intimidates you, they can make you feel a lot more powerful emotions. When they disagree with you, you feel let down. You feel almost a little bit of fear. When they approve of you, you feel a lot of approval. Okay? So women and men find people that make them feel like that. Okay? They find people that give them that emotional turmoil. Now, it doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean the person is constantly feeling shame when they're around the person. It means that people want to feel a range of emotions, and that's what connection is. So that's why we're going out there and we're going to do all these things in our copywriting. Now, how do you build respect? Well, first thing you need to do is you hold people accountable. What does that mean? So calling people on their shit in a nice way and holding them accountable builds respect because people know they can't wiggle out, they can't do stuff like that. I'll get into that more when we get into copywriting. But make people be actively honest. If you can build these 2 things with them and then start holding people's feet to the fire, they're going to respect you because they know they can't bullshit you. People respect people they can't bullshit. And generally, if you want to build respect with people, you have to be very good at what you're doing. And it has to sound like you know what you're talking about. And you have to brag without bragging. So, for example, like Frank Kern in his car. Now, the ways you build respect with people is, of course, you have to be seen as a father figure. You have to be seen as a Grant Cardone. That's why Grant Cardone has a very powerful brand, because people view him as Uncle Grant, the leader, the respected older veteran. Okay, same thing with Gary Vee. Tai Lopez does it to a similar effect by showing off all his cars and money. But the thing Tai does wrong, which, again, you can see that not everything has to be completely lined up with what I said, is he brags all the time. Without humbly bragging, he just shows off his cars and stuff like that. And so that's why a large amount of people hate him as well. So you have to be able to be a person that seems excessively honest, that holds people accountable, more like a mentor instead of a friend. Because people don't respect their friends. They respect their mentors and teachers. I'm sure you've had that teacher or that mentor that is very intimidating to be around and is constantly makes you accountable, and you respect them for that. You respect them for punching you in the face when you tell BS. And so these things right here, bragging without bragging, is a way to show your power, being generally good at what you do at to the point where people feel intimidated and they feel out of their depth when they're listening to you. And there's ways to achieve that without knowing what you're talking about. And then making people be honest and making people look in the mirror are very powerful ways to build respect. Now, when you're making your copy, the also most important thing you need to take into mind, and I know this is like a lot of different lessons, but these are things you have to think about when you're writing your copy. If you understand the underlying things that you shouldn't do or what you should do, you're just going to do them by default. Okay, and so this is how we need to be writing our copy. Now, you should never ever tell people what they should be thinking or what they should be doing. People don't do that. That's not how the brain learns. Okay? If I ever told you, hey, you should probably not touch the stove, you probably touch the stove. And the lesson, people learn lessons through joy or pain plus the thoughts that are happening in their head and the experience. That's how they learn lessons. So there's no point in even telling people anything. They don't learn it. I'm sure there's so many lessons you've read in a book that you made the same mistake and you didn't learn the lesson until you actually did it. Why? Because once you did it and you felt the pain plus the emotion, there you go. For example, when I got my big giant house, people before I bought the house all the time said, Alex, dude, you're just going to have this big thing that you're going to have to deal with, and it's going to be so annoying, it's going to stress you out, and like it's not even a good financial decision. Like you should just go and live frugally and be a minimalist. Okay, now, I'm selling my house right now. I'm moving to be a minimalist because of those exact same things. But I didn't decide to do that until 2 years in the house where I'm like, fuck, this is weighing me down. This is all these things. It wasn't even good to find, like same exact things. Why? Because you can't tell people anything ever. They have to learn things on their own. And so the way you make people actually learn things, if you want them to learn things, you have to artificially create that. You have to create that massive amount of pain or joy plus thoughts and decisions. That's how you teach people a lesson. That's why people use the term, I'm going to teach them a lesson. And then they like fuck someone up. All right, the person learns pain and they don't do that thing again. So you must lead a person to decisions. And that's why scripts suck. Because people go on and they talk at people instead of making people reach their realizations on their own. You're going to see that's one of the most powerful things we do with our script. Now, here's the next thing you must understand about the human brain. And there's a few slides in here. I've taught these before, but I really want to kind of sum them up as this. People don't really have free will. Let me explain. So you might be thinking like, I can decide what I want to do right now. I want to do this and I want to do that. But really what your decisions are based off of, or what your decisions come from, is everything that happened in the past. And so if you took your entire life as it is right now and then go 10 seconds from now, you are going to make that decision 10 seconds from now pretty much guaranteed. Because all the data that you make your decisions off of was already there. It's not like you make the decision in the moment. All the things that come into it come into that decision at the moment, and then you make the decision. So free will is pretty false. Okay, who you are is a cause and effect pattern. It's not who you decide to be. So you can debate all sorts of different things, but the way you want to build your life in general is you want to look at it in a cause and effect way. What I do right now will control the decisions I make 5 years from now. And that's pretty basic, but it comes down more to that. If you look at how people's brains work, they really can't decide what they're going to do and how they're going to behave. So, for example, If you wipe out an entire person's memory, they don't stop doing the same habits. They still have the same bad habits, like chewing tobacco or stuttering or anything like that. And those are really bad examples. But a person, if you wipe out their memory, will still do the same daily habits. They'll still do the same thing they do every single day and behave very similarly. They just won't remember anything. Okay? The brain gets in emotion, and then you're just programmed to work like that. Now, people will literally justify things that are completely false when they look at data. They'll find data, for example, confirmation bias, is people will go out there, and if you can convince people to believe something, they'll find the data to justify it no matter what. They'll find and reconstruct data to just justify anything. That's why we really can't predict anything, and humans are really bad at predicting things, because we find things that align with our beliefs, not things that are true. And if you can alter a person's belief and trigger likability, people will go and fall into what is called a phase 2 brain. And phase 2 is when habits and our emotion or our confirmation bias really starts to fall into place. And that's triggered by all the things we just talked about right here. Because what's going to happen is, for example, let's say we achieve all the things we just achieved. When you first meet someone, they're in phase 1. This is the hypercritical pattern-inducing part of the brain. What this means is if people are going to figure out you're full of shit or disagree with you, it's going to happen in this phase right here. And so during this phase, what we want to do is we want to build respect, trust, and rapport, and make the big thing important, and also pass all and build these things right here. Because once we have respect, trust, and rapport, and we've made the big thing important and understandable, person are going to shift to step 2 or phase 2. And this is where their brain stops working like phase 1. They stop analyzing patterns and they say, oh, this is the pattern. HCOM gets results. Alex is honest. I like Alex. Listen to Alex. This is the pattern. They're deciding how they're going to interpret it. Now, phase 2 could also be HCOM sucks. Don't listen to Alex. This guy is dishonest. Phase 2 is how the person's going to behave. And once they're in this phase right here, they're going to just naturally keep moving this direction, as long as nothing throws them off. The problem with most scripts is people introduce so many complications that throw them back into phase 1. Okay? If you say something that people think is clearly false, or you introduce something that's complex and they have to start thinking to understand, they pop back to phase 1. The brain is constantly trying to fall asleep to save energy. They always are. This is why cults and everything are so damn powerful. Because people they come in skeptical, but once the brain starts to fall asleep, which is what the brain always tries to do, this is why we love TV. The brain doesn't want to think. It doesn't want to analyze patterns. It takes a lot of energy. It wants to slip into phase 2. Because honestly, if your brain, well, when you were a kid, everything was amazing because your brain was constantly having to be in phase 1. It was constantly having to look at new patterns and digest them and make sense of the world. And it's completely overwhelming to the brain. It's very, very tough for the brain to constantly do that. And so what the brain does is it analyzes patterns and then passes it to phase 2, where the pattern is accepted. This is why when you're walking down the staircase or you're doing something where you can clearly see it's different, you'll still go for that extra step if the step was removed. It is constantly trying to turn the world into a repeatable pattern. And so we want to get people into pattern acceptance mode, which is step 2. And so feelings, once they're in step 2, are going to really control what actions the person takes. So once we get them in the phase 2 and we can start making them feel feelings, we can lead them wherever we want. We can get them to do anything we want them to do. And once we're locked into this pattern, which is identification with something, that, hey, I'm a rich guy, or I do this thing right here, we're going to keep taking actions to remain in phase 2. Whether that action is buying a product, whether that action is going to war, we're going to keep doing things to stay in phase 2. Okay, we don't like to be here. Anyone, no one does. And so it's very important that we build the proper patterns to embed so a person falls into phase 2, where we can just use emotions to kind of direct them all over the place exactly where we want them to go. It's the best way to explain it. People don't really have free will. Once we lock into something, we will find anything possible to stay into that lock, because you just need to assume that. So look, most webinars fail because people don't assume that people are in point 1. Point 1 is very hard. You have to get people out of point 1. If they're in point one and you start getting to this point right here where we're selling and working on them and trying to get them to buy our product, they won't buy because they're still looking at the patterns, and no pattern's been established. And more so, if the pattern isn't established earlier on, it's probably just going to establish itself as a bad pattern. This guy's full of shit, and they just hop off the webinar. Okay? So that's why, for example, when I talked about Trump saying 5 true things and then unloading some not so true things, that's what he's doing right there. You say 5 true things, person goes to stage 2 mind, then you can tell people, hey, by the way, rabbits are going to kidnap your kids. Okay, this sounds insane. But think of all the other things, like all politicians do this. They say 5 true things, and then they start unloading the shit that they need you to do for them to achieve their goals. Oh, yeah, the pharmaceutical company is going to do this thing or this thing. And then, they just push all the shit under the rug once you're in phase 2. Now, that's not what we're going to be doing on these calls, but we definitely want to get people into phase 2 because that's when people become agreeable. Very agreeable. They drop their guard. So, for example, if you sit down with a friend who you've known for so many years, you're going to start off in phase 2, and it's very easy for them to lead you. If you sit down with a complete stranger and they start telling you the same things, you're not going to be easily led. So, always assume people are at point 1. First, assume they have no awareness or intent of the problem. And we'll talk about this more in the next video. Now, what we also need to do is we need to make people identify with their beliefs. We need to make people identify themselves with beliefs we want them to have to buy a product. So, for example, one of the most powerful things that we've seen, we're going to be recapping a few things, so I'm going to kind of skim through some of these. But how do Democrats get a lot of people to vote for them? By making people feel like if they don't vote for them, they're racist, and other people shame them. And so people say, well, I'm not racist, so I'm going to vote Democrat. It's just their tactic. It's fine. Okay? Republicans do it too. If you don't vote Republican, you hate America. I don't hate America. I love America. I'm going to vote for Republicans. All right? Same thing. It's just what they're doing. And you can see how powerful it is. You can make people go to war over their damn beliefs. They go to fucking war with people over their beliefs. Their identification with something. And so what we need to do is we need to get people to identify with the person we need them to be to buy something from us. So, for example, in my webinar, I make people think, well, dude, if you want to make $200,000 a year, what type of person do you need to be? And then I make them look and think about who they are and what that person would be like. And I say, well, if you want to be that person, you have to make the same decisions that person makes. Invest in yourself. Take action. Get mentorship. Does that make sense? And then I don't sell them anything right there. I just leave it right there. And I go, yeah, I want to be that person. And I start making them identify with that person throughout the entire webinar. And at the end, they have to choose between staying that person and buying a course or not being that person and going back to hell. This is why you see people who identify as a rich person, they go and buy a Rolex. It's a $45,000 thing that tells time. I have a $6 watch that does the same thing. If we can make people view themselves in a certain way, commit to that, and then position your product as a way that will make or break that identification, you win. So, for example, a really powerful thing, you see people go to hotels and or you go to Vegas and oh yeah, you're a baller, blah, blah, blah. Here's the biggest room. You're a baller. You need these tables, blah, blah, blah. And then let's go gamble. Oh, you're not putting $1 million on. You're playing kind of conservatively right now. I thought you were a baller. Oh yeah, I'm a baller. Puts $1 million on and loses $1 million. That's exactly what's going on there. That's exactly what we need to do at the same time. So, the reason why this is so powerful, and just what you need to understand is think about the future and past are literally not real. They don't actually exist. The past feels like a very real thing, but it doesn't actually exist. You are always just blank at every moment. There's no definition of you. There's just a collection of thoughts that you believe happened in the past. Whether they happen or not doesn't matter. The past actually does not exist. You can't go back to it. It's not something that's finite or tangible. You can't. There's also no such thing as the future. You are always just here right now, and that's it. There's no anything controlling anything except your identification with those past actions that you believe have some relevance to who you are. So, the brain absolutely fucking hates that. And so it makes a pattern on everything. It looks at your past actions and says, this is who you are and this is the behaviors you will go into. I am this, I do this. And without that, you kind of fall apart. Without you have to understand, you have to look at how you acted in the past, and that's going to tell you who you are in the future. And if you don't have those two things, you're just some blank void that's going around, and the brain cannot tolerate that at all. It's completely insane to the brain. It doesn't work. So people will bend over backwards to confirm this. For example, World War II, you have people putting people in concentration camps and lighting them on fire. Why? Well, because I'm a good German and I believe in my country and this thing and that. They're not the people running concentration camps were, I hope not all bad people, but they have identification as Germans. Same things with Americans. You see people storming the beach or you see people going to war. Why are they doing that? Because this is who I was in the past. This is who I am. I am this identity, and therefore I'm going to go and kill people I don't even know who have a different identity. And so you have two people killing each other who've never even met before. That only happens if people identify strongly as two different things. If you completely deleted the minds of both those people right there and they didn't remember anything, the people would just look at each other and go, "Why am I standing here holding a gun? Hey, what are you doing?" Like that's what it is. And so now, what you have to understand is that that's just how powerful identities are. So we must make people identify in a way that aligns with our product, because then people will shell out anything for the product. So make a person feel rich and successful, and then say, "Oh, well, rich and successful people buy this car." Help them build a new identity. That's what we're always going to be doing in our pitches. And a strategy, if you can help a person buy into a new identity of themselves without telling them that, that's how you get them to buy something. You don't get someone to buy something. You don't get people to buy a supercar, or you don't get people to buy into a private jet membership by selling them the benefits of it and telling them, "Oh, it's going to save them money." You make them buy into it by feeling that they'll be more successful. They'll be matching this identity if they do it. That's how you get people to buy things like crazy. That's why you see people paying $100,000 for a gold-plated iPhone case. Like Justin Bieber got one. Why don't you have one? "Oh shit, I need to get one too." Like Rob something from the Kardashians couldn't get a phone case and lost his mind. Why? That's why. That was the only reason he wanted one. So you can get a person to give you $100,000 for a chunk of metal if you attach it to identity. So the other things we need to keep in mind when we're writing our copy is FOMO and scarcity. The reason why webinars work is you can isolate someone to long form. I saw this question in the group. The reason why they work is because there's a big FOMO if they leave the webinar. They have extreme FOMO. If they leave, they're going to miss something else. They're going to miss something else. And then we add extreme scarcity to get people to take action at the end of the call. Just to be honest, these are basic copywriting principles, but just understand this is things we're going to heavily rely on to get people to take action. Okay? Now, I talked about phase 1 and phase 2 brain, so I'm not going to talk about it again, but we're going to constantly trying to shift people also in the phase 2 brain in our webinars. And once we get them in the phase 2, the number one thing we don't do is get them back in phase 1. We don't want them thinking and being analytical, because then they're going to find faults in something, even if there aren't any faults. The whole job of phase 1 is to find faults and create safe patterns. We want them to get into accepting an automatic mode as fast as possible. That's why we build RTR. Now, the other thing we need to also keep in mind when we're writing our copy is not allowing people a logical way out of the copy. Whenever we're doing our copywriting, the product that we're selling has to be the very best place to be. It has to be the very best time to get into it. There has to be literally nothing to lose, and it has to be the best opportunity. You're going to see when we close, we never leave people a logical way out. We sell with emotions, but we also don't give logical ways out. Because when people are going to try and find something, they will sometimes use logical reasons to get out of an emotional buying decision. We don't want to give them a logical way out either. Once you give them the logical way out, the brain gives itself permission to buy emotionally. And so we're going to focus on that big time. Now, another thing you're going to see in this is when we're talking about how Trump won the election, it's very important that we start talking about our product from the beginning of the event. And we start establishing that it's awesome when they're already in phase 2 brain. HCOM is awesome. HCOM gets results. HCOM is awesome. HCOM gets results. You see it so many times in the webinar. Why? Because by the time I unveil HCOM, they're already wanting HCOM. They're already wanting me to sell them HCOM. Okay. If you look at any of when we talk about the scripts I use for Iron and Hyros, whenever I'm talking to people on the phone, I already established that they work over and over and over again before I start selling them anything. I just don't sell it to them. I just establish that it works. And we go through that over and over and over and over again. And so the more people hear something, the longer they hear it, the more believable they find it. Also, very quick thing, take away people's responsibility. The number one way to put a person back into phase 1 thinking is to put them on defensive mode. Take away people's responsibility always. Always blame it on someone else. Because as soon as you blame someone, people's identity gets hurt and they go into phase one to defend their identity. Don't do that. Just take away all responsibility from people. And also make people think long-term and attach their identity to the long-term or being a long-term thinker. One of the big reasons why people don't buy stuff in the moment is because they're thinking short-term. Okay? One of the reasons why people will buy things long-term is because they're thinking long-term. That makes no sense, but let me explain. So people will use long-term justifications to make some really poor buying decisions. Okay, they'll think in long-term ways they would never think in to justify buying something emotionally. Now, if you can make people think like that, like, oh man, yeah, this is $5,000 right now, but this is $12 a week over the next 10 years, and this is going to make you like $5 million, easiest sale ever. If you can make people live in that long-term state, they're going to not see money right now as money right now. They're going to see it over 10 years. That's a way better way. Because people, all money is how the person's viewing the money right now. If they view the money at $12 over 30 years, not a big deal. If they're seeing it at $5,000 today, big deal. But if you get people thinking in their long-term sense before you ever pitch them anything, like think about over 5 years how much money this is going to make you. Think about how it's going to be different over this. Think about it over the span of your lifetime. Oh yeah, it's $5,000 right now, but that's $12 a day over the span of your lifetime. Incredibly powerful. Another thing we're going to be relying on in our close is the pain of buying versus the pain of not buying. All a close is we have 2 points that a human's going through. We have the pain of buying the product and the pain of not buying. So whenever you offer someone something, let's say it's $5,000, the pain of buying is quite high. The pain of not buying is quite low. We need to adjust this. So what we need to do is we need to cause massive pain by talking about the benefits of the product, the results they're going to get, how they're missing out, the community, all the things that they're going to gain. And so we want to use this to lower the pain of not buying, or increase the pain of not buying. We want to increase the pain of not buying, and then we need to lower the pain of buying, which can be refunds, payment plans, making people think long term. There's all sorts of things we're going to do. But you need to understand, whenever we're closing, all that happens is once a person is capable of being closed, all right, close capable, all that's going to happen is we have these 2 bars, and we need to lower the pain of buying and increase the pain of not buying. As soon as the pain of not buying becomes more painful than the pain of buying, what's going to happen is the person will buy. Because people go off of their pains. That's it. There's this wall right here of pain, where if they give you $5,000, it's going to be very painful. If you can just make this right here more painful than giving you $5,000, they'll do it, because that's how the brain operates. They'll do it every single time. No one's ever been in more pain of not buying something and had the money and not bought. That's just not how it works. So we need to get them there. And then also give them emotional crutches. If you've ever been thinking about, like, if you're on a diet and then you break your diet, you always give yourself an emotional crutch. Like, hey, I'm on a diet, but it's the 4th of July. Yeah, I shouldn't buy this car, but I'm young and it's only $1.50 a day. People give themselves all sorts of insane comp-outs to act like goof troops. Now, again, it's our responsibility to sell ethical products that help people and deliver the result. We're never going to keep customers long-term after this. We can sell all day. But we also want to play off of the weaknesses that we can exploit to get as many customers in as possible. So basically, when a person's buying, we want to give them emotional crutches. And I just want to state it like that. Think of all the ways that you give yourself emotional crutches to behave in ways that you don't agree with. And we want to give people those ways. That's why Black Friday is so powerful. Oh yeah, but it's not happening again for a year. Oh, dude, the TV's $20 more. You're spending all your paycheck right now. Okay? Now, also realize that the needing to be accepted is also a super powerful driver for humans. We're going to play off this a lot. Community, culture, friendship. People like me. This is something we're going to play off on our pitches as well. Be able to look for it. You need to be thinking of all these things that we're talking about. Okay? And so, what we're going to be doing in our pitch from a emotional selling standpoint is we're going to be focusing on building RTR, respect, trust, and rapport the entire time. And at the beginning of the pitch, we're going to hook. We're going to cause heavy agitation. Secondly, while getting them to self-commit and getting them in alignment with the person we need them to be. And then we're going to create desire plus understanding, and we're going to move all the questions about the solution and build a belief in the solution. And this gets them closed capable. We're going to focus on all the things we talked about so far. And then all we're going to do is, once they're closed capable, is we're going to make the pain of not buying lower than the pain of buying, while the entire time focusing on creating fear of missing out and closing logical ways out. That's what we're going to be focusing on achieving the entire pitch. And you're going to see that you're going to see exactly how I'm achieving this and doing this when you watch me execute the pitch. Everything I just talked about is going to become very clear when you watch me actually do the pitch. It's going to become very clear. But I want you to be aware of all these things before we actually do the pitch. So in the next video, we need to talk about why most webinars fail. It's going to be a much shorter video. And then we're actually just going to dive straight into the pitch. Let's do that.